everybody. Thank you very much for joining room 1. Panel, I think this is the fullest room, so no pressure. So over to you guys. You have 30 minutes to talk about less profit, more pressure, coasted roasters, and the reality of the rise in labour costs. Over to you.
Hi, everyone. Yes, this is a very full room. I knew it would be busy, but this is great to see everyone. So I introduced myself. I'm Sinead. I work with a company called Alkimii, but I hate saying it, but I do have over 20 years experience working in operations as a deputy GM, and I decided to move to Alkimii as, I suppose, what I really want to do is give people tools to try and really help their managers and help their productivity within a hotel. So I have a wonderful panel here with me today, so I'm going to let everybody introduce themselves. So we'll start with yourself, Ian.
Good morning, everyone. My name's Ian Namey. I'm the Director of Finance at the Savoy. I have been there for about 18 months. And my background before that, I was at Fuller's, the pub company before that, so I'm relatively new into hotels in comparison to many directors of finance in luxury properties. And before that, actually, I've got a broad sort of corporate career, starting in audit and spending a lot of time in transformation, including cost transformation. So looking at cost pressures is definitely close to my heart.
Hi, everyone. I'm Samuel O'Rourke. I am Head of Finance at Fooditude, which is a corporate catering company operating mainly within London. I've been there for about 2 years now. Prior to that, my experience was about 10 years in hotels across sort of payroll and finance roles. All around sort of England, Scotland, and Ireland as well. So experience around payroll and finance within hotels.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Malik. I'm a hotel owner, operator. Been in the business for about 20 years now. Started off as night porter, chambermaid, breakfast chef, receptionist. We've done it all. Ran a very small hotel, 26-bedroom hotel, up to a 75-bedroom hotel, to now put together probably a few hotel deals where we've done 120 keys, and currently purchasing something that we're changing from 99 keys to 120. I'm also chairman of a hotel consortium with about 100 owners that own over 300 hotels in the UK. And within that, we have a 15-bedroom B&B in Victoria, all the way up to a 500-bedroom hotel in King's Cross, with some of the largest groups in the UK, which include Splendid, 4C, Crimson Eclipse, Criterion Capital. So I kind of see the sort of issues that the smaller hoteliers experience, but also the large groups as well.
Perfect. Thank you very much. So I'm going to put a question to the audience. Obviously, it's a really important topic, and I think since last year's budget, dare I say it, I know there's another one coming up, but last year's budget and the changes that came into payroll in April 2025 and the effect that was going to have, I'm going to ask a question to the room. If, show of hands, if you're hoteliers or you're in a hotel in different positions, if you know what your payroll percentage is as of this week, as of today, before we get to the end of the month for payroll. Give us a show of hands. Okay, we have a few, so I'm very happy to see that. But you can see, obviously I don't know everybody's role that's here, but I suppose that's the one message that we want to try and get across, is the importance of actually knowing where we stand with our payroll percentage. And when, I suppose, the cuts came, or the budget hit in April 2025, you know, by just coming to work and doing the exact same job, there was money taken off the bottom line straight away. So what are we doing to actually, I suppose, address that? And that's really what we're here to discuss today. So I'm going to put a few questions to the panel here. So Al, I'm actually just going to start with you from an owner's perspective. How has the rising labour costs changed the way you evaluate the hotel's operational performance?
Well, look, let's sort of go back 5 years, because everything's changed in the last 5 years, you know, at every level. So interest rates have gone up, cost of labour's gone up, all your variable costs have gone up. There's so much pressure on margin, it's unbelievable. It's probably it's the compound pressure of all those variables together at the same time hitting us really hard as a hotel owner. So, but the one that I particularly, as a hotel owner, keep a very, very strict eye on is the cost of labour, because that's the one thing that I can actually control. So
Yeah.
it's been very challenging, and I suppose in the last 5 years, my cost of labour has probably gone up by 10 on one asset, one medium-sized asset, £10,000 a month increase. So up 5-6%, which is massive. When you include the interest rate increases, your F&B costs, your business rates, everything else, suddenly you're looking at an additional cost of about £15,000 to £16,000 a month, when the asset was probably making £350,000 a year in profit. So it eats into the margin in a big way.
Yeah, and I suppose it's really looking at maybe what investment is needed, to try and help to manage that. What I do notice, I work with over 510 hotels across Ireland and the UK, and you're not alone when I first meet them and I go in and ask them, do they know what their payroll percentage is? But what I'm finding is that there's a lot of investment in front of house, but not as much investment in maybe tools for back of house and for your managers to actually help you manage this. Because, and I'm going to come to you now, Ian, but where payroll is sometimes always seen as a finance, or it's the payroll manager, it's their responsibility for it. But I suppose what I want to get into, it's not just their responsibility, and looking at whose responsibility is it. So Ian, I'm going to come to you and say, what's the one misconception about labour cost control that you'd most like to correct in the industry?
Yeah, I think there's always a balance between, cutting and managing. And I see, certainly the role of finance as a partnership with operations. And we're trying to, certainly on a tactical level, and if we're talking weekly labour costs and looking at labour percentages, I'm very keen for my team and the operations to work, together to look at how we can optimise those rotas, make sure that we're doing absolutely the right thing at a tactical level week on, week out. I think standing back and the conversation to have with owners, and we have at the exec level, is also then looking at that on a strategic level. So looking at the structures that you've got in place. Now that isn't always given away by your, it's there in your labour percentages, but you need to do both. So you need to work closely with the tactical side, and looking at the insight that you're able as a finance team to share with the operations to help them to optimise rotas, but then also look at your structure strategically, and have you got, some of the traditional roles between, things that are happening in front of house and guest experience, guest relations, in some bigger properties. Are there ways that you can optimise your structure to give you sustainable cost savings? And you need to make that shift on both fronts, because the labour costs have gone up so much, as Al has said, and work on both those things together.
Yeah, and I suppose, and again, I'll put it to the audience. How many times do we actually talk about payroll on a daily basis, on a weekly basis? Or do we wait until payroll is actually, we're in the week and it's monthly payroll? How many conversations have happened before we get to that point? Give me a show of hands of a daily conversation. Okay, we have a few. And then we go to weekly. Excellent. And monthly. Okay. So I suppose one of the messages that what we wanted to really get across here is the importance of a daily conversation. I remember my time, and I don't know if anyone can resonate with this, but I do remember my time in operations when if any of the floats that were handed in at the end of the night were down by £10 or £20, how many conversations would be had about it? If anyone can resonate with me about this, would there be emails, there'd be phone calls? I'm seeing a few nodding heads here. And that's £20. And the way, I suppose, what we try to approach it with Alkimii, and I want your guys' opinion on this, is by having a daily conversation for 2 minutes about your payroll and the performance maybe of how yesterday was, isn't that more important than having all those emails and conversations around a float that was down by £20? Because if we don't manage our payroll on that day-to-day basis, and suddenly there's extra hours there for 20 members of staff, and it might just be an extra half an hour that they've worked. If we add that up every single day, then at the end of the week, that's going to have a dramatic effect. So is a daily conversation, or maybe how do you address that or I'll start with you again, Ian, in your hotels, and then I'll go over to Sam.
Yeah, certainly daily conversations, and that, you know, I'm looking at the operations teams to have those conversations, and if you've got the right leaders in place in your operations, they are managing that daily and weekly. So that's really important that the operations are that close. They understand that they own their budgets, and they've got to deliver against that and react to that. I think, and then I still think the value of the longer term planning is also that you've got to have both those pieces working together.
And yourself, Sam?
I think we're very good in hotels that's having those daily meetings, talking about what occupancy was yesterday, talking about what went right, what the guest complaints were, what went well, all these feedback elements. What's our feedback score? Where are we on TripAdvisor? All these types of things. But very rarely do we talk about what the labour cost was yesterday, or how did this department do versus what they said they were going to do. And I think, as you rightly highlighted, the costs are so large at the moment that I think it's important to have those conversations. And one thing we were able to do at a hotel I was in Ireland was introduce that, move away from that sort of surprise at the end of the month to moving to not just weekly payroll meetings, but incorporating payroll costs into that morning meeting to say, right, you know, this is where front of house were yesterday, this is where they're looking like for today, this is where F&B are, this is where restaurant 1, restaurant 2, and enabling those conversations and putting the emphasis back on operations managers. Operations managers can get to a stage where they come to those meetings knowing what their payroll cost is that day. I remember our GM used to call out and say, right, you know, spa manager, what is your payroll cost today? Didn't mind if it was over or under, but what is it? Just that knowledge can give you that sort of at least focus on it.
Yeah, and I think it's the empowerment, and where I go back to, I suppose, what I said initially, where it's not just a finance role, it's not a payroll manager's role, it's everybody's role. And you know, I've been to many of these different conferences where a recurring theme is where we're trying to make hospitality feel like a career again. And I think there's been a time where that's slightly been lost. And it's how do we do that? And I suppose that leads me into empowering our managers to actually take ownership for their areas and help them build in their career. I know that a lot of our customers actually use Alkimii as a way of performance management and saying, right, we're giving you the tools, so who's actually able to perform here? But I think it's more about not just giving them the tools, it's transparency with everybody, that it's not just the payroll team that are seeing what the payroll percentage are, but that you're looking at the exact same information that your managers are. Because if they can't see it and it's not being talked about, how are we expecting them to actually manage it? So I suppose that would lead me into what does a good roster look like from a finance perspective? And I'll put this to anyone in the audience, not just about coverage, but about cost control. What does a good roster look like?
I think it's having it in the right, well, I suppose having the right people in the right places at the right time, you know, linking it to revenues. I think very rarely do you see a roster that's sort of linked to revenues, or very rarely do you see an operations team that's got that visibility. Really, you know, you want, when your busiest time, you want to have the right people in there, and when you're not so busy and you've got a bit of downtime, you want to make sure that your payroll is not sort of sat idle, or there's sort of very little wastage. I think looking at how operations managers deal with, you know, crunch times. We've all been in hotels where you call crunch and you deal with a difficult sort of busy breakfast or busy position or busy checkout for a couple of hours. What you don't want to see is people brought in for long shifts to cover those periods. You want to see a bit of dynamic element to rosters. So I think that's what's crucially important, and I think that's what those daily conversations can help. You know, we know we're going to be busy at this stage, and that's something that perhaps we can address on the day rather than.
Yeah, and I think I want to get the message across, because, you know, sometimes when I showed a few people the heading for this, the initial reaction is about cutting rosters, but this conversation isn't about cutting rosters. This is, I suppose, the message we're trying to get across is maybe working smarter and having that transparency. So I suppose, going back to from an owner's perspective, with the labour pressures, influence your strategy on brand affiliation, service level, and property positioning.
Yeah, I mean, look, absolutely. We first of all, let's just want to say that I think in today's world, it's so important to sophisticate the back office operations today, where we've traditionally we haven't really done that. The front end of hotels, you know, it's very sophisticated now with CRM, revenue rate management, PMS, all of those sort of stuff, but the back end hasn't been really looked at. And then, of course, streamlining all your operations. We've had no choice. For example, the smaller asset in Nottingham, 75 bedrooms, we've had to close the restaurant. We only do breakfast there now. We're not full service anymore because we've had to cut the labour cost to take in that extra cost that it's coming in every month. So we've had to streamline stuff. The asset that we're looking at in the southwest, we're reconfiguring all the ground floor and lower ground floor to make additional bedrooms, take out, lots of meeting spaces that we don't need. We're even looking at taking out the pool because, the labour cost on the pool is so high. So streamlining the bar, the restaurant, so that it all just flows and you need less labour to run those. And we chose the brand specifically because it was focused service and not full service, just to keep costs down. It gives us the flexibility to, if we need to, maybe close the hotel the restaurant for 3 months in the quieter periods and just offer a very lean service. And the other things that we're looking at is putting in sort of more of these kind of what they call cloud kitchen services. So you kind of make you turn your kitchen into almost a delivery unit where you're doing the same menu for the restaurant. So at least you've covered the guests who've arrived late. Maybe it's raining. They want to just stay in, don't want to go out somewhere to eat, but can still get something decent. But then also serve room service with the same menu, and then also connect to all the aggregators and deliver to Uber and Deliveroo and Uber Eats and all that kind of stuff. So you kind of just trying to streamline it and make it a lot easier so that you at least cover the major costs of the electrics, the gas, and the labour to run those departments. So.
Okay.
I think for the other side is looking at the top line.
Yeah.
That's the other part that when I look at how we're incentivizing, upsells, reservations, front desk, etc. That's clearly goes hand in hand with this. So we're not just looking at reducing labour costs. We're looking to drive top line because that obviously helps your percentage as well. So looking at how you can structure those incentives in the right way, put the right level of accelerators in if targets have been beaten. How do you keep that incentivization going? Have you got the right, should you have caps? What level of caps should you have to really try and drive top line? Because that's we don't want to have a race to the bottom in terms of cutting. We actually want to grow and we want to keep pushing growth.
Yeah, and I think that's very interesting because, one thing that I'm definitely quite passionate about is our employees and their experience. Are they bought into the culture that we have? That they don't feel that, the budget was announced and suddenly it's cut on rosters. Well, where does that leave me? Am I going to get my regular shifts? Because I've always had them. Is that suddenly going to be gone? So it's how we actually look after our employees. And I think you've made a very valid point about, incentives for the team to actually upsell, that they can kind of feel that benefit as well. But I suppose it's looking at other things that we can do for the employees, and something. And you're probably thinking, how is this related to labour? But for me, it really is, where if I speak to hoteliers and ask them, like, how often are you doing your yearly appraisal with your teams? And a lot of times when I ask that question, I get eyes to the floor. They don't want to have eye contact with me. And, so there's not that level of confidence that they're being done. And if they're being done, was it done last year and filed away and never looked at again? Can anyone resonate with maybe something like that happening? Is that, or I'll put it out there, are you doing regular check-ins with your employees? Is that something that any of you guys would currently do?
Look, that would be my GM as well. He would make sure that he's looking after staff. I got an email yesterday from him asking to make contributions to grants that he can get for doing further development and training and stuff like that, which we approve. So, it'll cost us a little bit of money, but we're getting, I think there's a grant out there for hotel owners. It's about £2,000 per employee, actually, which is quite interesting. And the contribution is about £500 per employee. So it's not bad at all. So, of course, you've got to do all that nurturing, development, regular appraisals. Otherwise, you'll see, if you don't do it, you're just going to see the motivation just going down straight away. So yeah, and you often see, you can see it straight away. So they've had their appraisals, and the next day they're coming in a lot more dynamic, a lot more chirpy, a lot more happier. So you can't. I don't think you can run a hotel if you're not effectively if you're not doing these sort of things. So yeah.
Yeah, you absolutely need to have the right retention strategies in place and building that. You know, the amount of money you save from keeping people, developing people, and seeing them grow. And you know, the Savoy is blessed with being a great, you know, hotel for people to have on their CV. There's lots of people who've been in the Savoy for 2 or 3 years. Sam, you were one as well that have been there and then moved on to other things. And it's really important that everyone is looking to develop their careers and building hospitality careers. So if you're able to keep and develop your people and retain people, that clearly saves you, recruitment costs and the disruption when people leave. And you do sometimes save money when people leave, and you have churn and you have vacancies, and sometimes that does help you achieve your budget. But in the long term, that isn't a sustainable strategy.
Yeah.
That's the beauty of our industry, right? The hospitality is one of the only industries where you can take someone who walks in as a housekeeper and ends up being, a GM, and you can see that growth over the years. And as a hotel owner, nothing makes me, more happy when I see someone that has been able to develop in that way and go from very, very little confidence to being, someone who can run an operation and run the whole thing. And I've seen that firsthand many times. So that's the beauty of hospitality, actually. So yeah.
It is the beauty of hospitality, and I put myself in that category. I actually started off, my first hotel role was actually as a lifeguard. I don't know if I ever told any of you that, but it was actually as a lifeguard. But I was very lucky and fortunate that I worked with some amazing managers who really invested in their employees and me, and sat down and did have regular check-ins. And I suppose that's why I'm so passionate about it. But it worries me when I ask that question to hotels that that's not something that's happening. So even something as small as that is those regular check-ins with your teams, and how to make that nice and simple and easy, and come up with goals for them, come up with plans for them, and again keeping that retention down, because the amount of effort and time that goes into churn and turnover and having to sit down and train a new member of staff, it's not just actually cost for the employee. It's your time, it's your cost, where you could actually be spending that time doing something else. If we look at training, how much time is spent on admin rather than actually sitting down with your teams and doing trainings? Is training something that? Sorry, go ahead, Al.
Well, the churn thing's a big one, because I've got people that have worked for me for 15 years, and those people now are doing the job of 3 people. So if one of those left, I'd have to employ 3 other people to be able to cover their role. So, the more you can keep your staff and keep them motivated and develop them and nurture them, you really do save.
I think it's easy to see employees on the P&L as a number, and I suppose in this increased cost environment, it's easy to see them as a negative. But it is also an opportunity to celebrate their craft, I suppose. We're now in a situation where I think we're seeing employees be valued, whether it's chefs or front of house service staff. So I think all you're talking about there around engaging with them, making them feel valued, is vitally important as costs increase. Rather than them see themselves as a negative and them see themselves as a cost to the business, they need to see themselves as an asset to the business. And I think if you start treating them that way, you will see that they will start coming up with cost-saving ideas naturally, whether that's saving on bottles of water on a table, or whatever it is in the room, or whatever it is in the F&B restaurant. We will see them come up with those ideas and be engaged if you engage them and treat them with that respect, I suppose.
Excellent. I'll just go back to, I suppose, one of the, just looking, I suppose, at the costed rosters, and Ian, I'll put this to yourself, in terms of how important do you see labour cost forecasting before the month rather than reconciliation after the month?
It's really important. We're all held to our forecasts, and not just labour, but across all of those pieces. So the more insight, the more tools you've got that can get those forecasts accurately, and ease of doing that. The days of having spreadsheets stuck on walls in back office rooms and having to be all gathered together should be behind us, and it isn't.
It's not.
But we're still living in this disparate information that is in people's pockets, and people being given printouts of their rosters, and not a kind of virtual world where it's all easy and should be at the touch of a button back to to the people who need the information.
Yeah, I think that's it, and it is quite worrying. It's out there that spreadsheets are still a thing. I would say in a very large percentage. And again, I put that down to the when I say the employee experience, your manager's experience. If they're trying to perform and they're working off what the unknown, the Excel sheet that they get at the end of the time, and I suppose the importance, and is this something that you do in, like, the importance of actually updating those forecasts? So what I'm finding in the UK specifically is a forecast is actually put in for nearly a month ahead, and how often is that looked at then within the month to actually get that as accurate as possible, because I like to try and get people to forecast weekly. And when I say that, people go, no, we do monthly. And it's like, that's fine. But what happens in 3 weeks' time if there's a big change to that? So is that something that you would review on a regular basis?
Certainly something would like to do more frequently. If I think of my career, which hasn't always been in hospitality, if I think of I was in call centres at BT and we were looking at staffing at 15-minute intervals across all the call centres across the globe, and we're, if I think of Fuller's F&B, we were looking at staffing levels at peak periods by half an hour intervals, and how busy were the bars? Should you have more colleagues on? Actually, that would have driven more revenue. Have you got your staffing shifts right at that level? And I see hotel staffing isn't quite at that level yet. Mm-hmm. So I think there's opportunity for us to learn from other industries and really drive some improvements.
Yeah, and I think another key message is, like, where, if I suppose all of the points that we've talked about here, if we collectively put those together, everybody benefits. Everybody benefits. So not just the employee, the guests actually benefit, because, who goes into a hotel and knows whether the employees are happy or not? And I'll go back to that. And the difference in how you feel as a customer and how you want to spend your money as a customer. If you're working with, or you've been served by somebody who is, happy in their work, you're going to stay, you're going to come back, you're going to recommend it. So, so for me, I'm kind of seeing it all connected. Is that kind of something for yourself in your hotels, Al?
Yeah, absolutely. Of course, if your staff are not happy and their aura is not right, the customer's going to pick it up straight away, right? So of course, and actually, scheduling is critical for that, because there's no point scheduling people on shifts when they can't do it. Mm-hmm. And then they don't turn up, then you're understaffed. So we actually like to do a quarterly rota where we just start putting in when people are taking holidays. We kind of take advance notice of, I need this day off, I need that day off, I can't work this weekend, I've got to pick up the kids at 3:00 from school and all that kind of stuff. So we start doing that quarterly, then we get closer to the month, we look at the full monthly rota, and then of course on the Wednesday before the week, we check the weekly rota. And it's not just the hours that we're checking, we're actually checking the cost, because we need to know also if there's holiday pay involved, if there's going to be a higher cost for that week. So, and I have to be very honest, I'm very, very controlling. I have to be, because it's my money, and I sign off the rota every single week. And if it's not, and if I'm not happy with it, I will trim it down and send it back, because I've got a mortgage to pay. So yeah, we have to. Yeah. I think it's the one area that is that I'm extremely controlling over.
So I suppose I thought, how are we going to fill half an hour? But I see that our time is nearly up. So I suppose I'm going to leave you with 3 takeaways, and guys, jump in if you want to add to my 3 takeaways. Would be shared responsibility and ownership of the payroll, daily communication, not even weekly, daily communication, but it could be 1 minute. I think, like anything in life, if we don't talk about it, it goes to, in my life anyway, if I don't talk about it, it goes to the back of our mind. So have regular conversations with your teams, and then I suppose sharing the tools and information with them, and your employee experience, and that comes from sharing the tools with them to be able to actually perform when it comes to payroll management, not just about cutting, as we said. Any other final words from yourselves, guys?
Personally, I just think it's about sophistication and productivity. So the next 5-10 years, it's going to be. I think it's not doom and gloom, but it's certainly not going to be that easy either, especially for, I think, mid-scale premium budget sort of hotels. I think we've got some interesting times ahead of us. We'll see what Rachel's got to say on the 22nd, is it 22nd or 27th?
Yeah.
27th. But we've got to, with the way the labour market is and labour cost, it's productivity and sophistication. And you need tools like labour scheduling tools. And also, I'd also look at prop tech stuff to help with your maintenance back office. It's all sophistication on your back office operations.
Yeah.
Time's running out.
Time's running out. So if anybody, I'm here for the day and for the evening, so if anybody does want to talk to me, I'm sure you've seen my name, Sinead. I'm here from Alkimii and happy to just have conversations with anyone. So, yeah, thank you all for listening. I appreciate
Thank you. Give it up for the panel.